Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Frank Sacco, just by way of introduction. Most people on the panel already know me. I am the president of Rhode Island Second Amendment Coalition. I am an attorney licensed in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and all the federal courts. I am the city solicitor for the town of Johnston and president of the Rhode Island Second Amendment Coalition. Let me go over some of the bills that we have before the Senate today. First bill I want to talk about is Senate Bill S2134. That's the Gun Reporting Act for the Attorney General's office. The reason why we're in support of this bill is the Attorney General's office needs to be accountable for what they do with regard to dispositions in cases. A couple of years ago, we actually challenged the Attorney General's office and said, how many of these cases do you plea away, you drop, if they're gun-related? And the Providence Journal actually fact-checked us. It came back as approximately 90% of the gun charges in Rhode Island either plead down or dropped. That's not, and we actually had the Providence Journal fact-check that. The legislature needs to know that if you're passing gun laws, that they're being enforced, and they're being enforced correctly. We can't keep putting gun laws on the books if the Attorney General is not enforcing them. So you people need to know that. The Attorney General has consistently, over the last couple of years, said, we don't want to do that, or they have an opposition to this. Why would it be an opposition? It's once a year they come in and they explain to you what they're doing with the disposition of these gun cases. So let me give you a for instance so you'll understand why we are in such a support of this bill. Give you a case that we're following out of Johnston. 3 o'clock in the morning, a couple of people go into the Denny's in Johnston. These people actually happen to be gang members, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, they start a fight in Denny's. One of them has a Smith & Wesson 9mm, takes the gun out, starts waving it around to the patrons. A fight ensues. They leave Denny's. The police are called, and they're in the parking lot. The police actually catch the people in the car with a loaded Smith & Wesson 9mm. To make matters worse, that firearm had obliterated serial numbers. The person had gang affiliation. The person was from Delaware. The judge let the person out. The Attorney General, this happened February of 2017. This person had no ties to the state of Rhode Island. The allegations were they're waving a 9mm around in Denny's, and the person's out. The Attorney General's office did not bring an information till October of 2017, 8 months later. And where's that person? Gone. They put it down for a PAC date in December of 2017. Defendant never showed up. They put it down in the gun court for January. The defendant still didn't show up. That person is now, right now, there's a warrant outstanding held without bail. Does anybody know about this? Does the Attorney General office report to you, the legislature, say what they're doing to enforce these gun laws? That's why we need this reporting bill. This is something the legislature needs to know about. So this is, let's make matters let's make matters a little bit worse for this case. When the person, this gang member, was arrested, he was already wanted as a fugitive from justice out of state, and they still let him out. This is why we need reporting on this of what's going on with the Attorney General. The legislature needs to know if these gun laws are being enforced. We really do. Senate Bill 2274. This is the one where it adds in long guns and shotguns, and it creates a prohibition against people traveling with them. The reason we have a little bit of hesitation with this is it seems to create more of a defense. So somebody could be driving to the range, could be driving someplace else, get pulled over, and they happen to have firearms in their car. Even if they're unloaded, locked in a case, an officer can arrest that individual and say, you know what, go to court. You prove that you were going to the range. You prove that you were going to the gun store. It creates a defense. During the meantime, somebody's life is ruined because of that. They have to hire an attorney, go to court, and they're facing charges. But now, it's great. Now we put a defense in there. You now have to prove in court that you were doing that. It's kind of a little bit of a dangerous bill. It hasn't been added there, and for good reason. Let's talk about Senate Bill 2289. This is the gun-free zone bill. This bill could not be a worse bill. We've been up here for the last 5 years arguing against it. I stated this when I was on Channel 10 the other day in Newsmakers. I'll say it again. Every parent with a child in a K through 12 school in Rhode Island should be absolutely furious at what the Moms Demand Action are doing and the Everytown people are doing. They're trying to institute the exact same failed gun-free zone that was in Newtown, Connecticut, that was in San Bernardino, California, that was in the Pulse nightclub in Florida, and now sadly again in Florida just recently. When are they going to wake up that gun-free zones don't work? All they do is attract people that are going there to create harm. If you look at the FBI reports, actual real reports, go back 50 years, every single mass shooting except for 2 or 3 has happened in a gun-free zone. We want to put that in our K through 12 schools? A gun-free zone is not a solution. We need real security in our schools. We've been saying this for the last 5 years. No one is listening. After Sandy Hook,
Senator Archambault.
Actually, just to interrupt you quickly, because it's not on the calendar. I actually, Senator Lombardi and I have talked to Rep. Amori on the other side, and he has a bill to require a police officer at every school. And I'm going to put that bill in, and Senator Lombardi's putting the bill in for the funding mechanism to be able to pay for it. It's really well thought out. I don't think that the League of Cities and Towns are going to feel warm and fuzzy about it because there's an expenditure within the budget. You know, the lion's share of town revenue is eaten up by school committees, as it should be, for the higher education of children. But the bill would require there to be a police officer at every school, just for the reasons you just said. And I don't think either of you would be opposed to that. So, but you can continue.
Okay. Okay. Now, after Sandy Hook in 2012, the NRA actually put together something called School Shield. This is a program they put together where they have grants, where they will actually come out and work with law enforcement to take a look at the schools and give you an evaluation on risk. Not once did anybody ask about that. They will actually come out and work with law enforcement and say, where are the risks in our schools? And what can we do to improve them? It's a free service. There's grants that happen, but no one is listening to us to try to improve the security on that. These are things we should be doing to enhance security in our schools, not putting out a sign out front saying, oh, this is a gun-free zone. To make matters worse, they're putting it on their website that this particular town or that particular town has now passed a resolution to say, we don't want any guns in our school. Why don't you just put a big flag out there and say, we're not going to have any security in our schools? It's absolutely terrible. I wish people would listen and say, let's work on real solutions in our schools. Now, with regard to...
Senator Metz.
Yeah, if I can, Mrs. Kosho, in a way I agree with you, but by the same token, you can't have people running around in the schools with guns, because if you have someone, and the law is specific that it's peace officers, and as Senator Archibald just said, and the co-sponsor in the House, if it's peace officers that have been trained that are on duty in the school, that's one thing. But just someone walking in and having something on them, it's a whole lot different. Just like down there in Florida, that gentleman was trained and didn't even go in the building. So now you want someone to walk in the building that may have a gun. And it's a whole lot different. It's a whole lot different when someone's shooting at you. So I agree with you in one respect, but the best thing is not to have them around unless it's a trained police officer that's in the building. So that's the only thing that I disagree with you on.
I respectfully disagree with you. If you look at the exemption for this, for people who have CCWs on school grounds, this was put in place by our Attorney General in 1990. The reason it was put in place in there was in the event we needed to have private security or additional security in school, we don't have to have police officers. We could have trained officers that have possibly been retired and now are not functioning under the police department's authority. They could use their CCWs issued because they're retired and actually be in there as a police force. Without their exemption, they're felons if they walk onto the school grounds. In addition to that, if you look at it, since 1990, approximately 28 years, we've had 0 instances in Rhode Island of a CCW holder going on school and doing anything, hurting anyone. So unfortunately, 28 years of experience and history are against you on that one. Now, when I was on Newsmakers, Linda Finn sat there and said, you don't have any examples of CCW people helping out. You can go on, and I brought paperwork today, and I will submit copies. In the last month, 22 separate incidents of CCW holders stopping crimes. One of them mass shooting, one of them helping police stop and apprehend an MS-13 gang member. CCW holders are actually law-abiding citizens. You can't look away from the fact that they have been licensed by our Attorney General's office, by our police departments to carry anywhere in this state. They are the safest people out there. To sit there and say, if we have them in their school, they're going to be running around and carrying a gun, they are. And for 28 years, there hasn't been a problem. Why are we changing it now? I could tell you right now, if we put people in here, in this room, that were in the Pulse nightclub, or in San Bernardino, or in Sandy Hook, and said, if you could go back in time and put one CCW holder on that ground to take out that shooter before he killed all those people, would you do it? I bet every one of them would say yes. But you want to take that option away.
Yeah, if I can.
Senator Metz.
I respectfully disagree. And if they come in and they got a pistol, and the person that's doing all the shooting got an AR-15, they got enough common sense that they wouldn't do that. I've been in the service myself, so there's a whole lot difference. You have a handgun and someone else got an automatic weapon. So that's all I'm going to say on that. I respectfully disagree.
Well,
If we could just have the audience, you'll all get your opportunity to speak. So if we could
Okay.
just have one witness at a time.
all right. So
Mr. Sacco.
I'll move on. I think I've beat
Thank
that one
you.
up enough. Let's go to Senate Bill 2319. This is the magazine limitation. In 1994, we had the assault weapons ban. It was a federal ban, and it limited the magazine capacity to 10 rounds, and it also banned whole classes of firearms. I know this because the firearm that I carry, a SIG 228, was actually purchased during the time that the ban was in place. It was actually manufactured pre-ban, but I couldn't get the factory 13-round magazine that came with it. I had to get a 10-round magazine with it. Okay? We have 10 years worth of data from that. That federal ban went away due to its sunset clause. There were two separate studies on that to find out if it had any measurable effect on crime or violence. Both independent studies came back. These are independent studies from the government. You can check, and unlike other people that come up here, I'll actually give you where the statistics come from. The Task Force on Community Preventive Services and the National Institute of Justice did surveys on this. One of the reports is over 100 pages, 170-something pages. And they came back and said, no measurable reduction in crime or violence. It doesn't work. We have 10 years worth of data to say it doesn't work. So we're going to do it again? We have proof that this does not work. Now, if you want to take a look at and say, well, some people are fighting for this to say, well, if we have a magazine limitation, it would allow individuals, police officers to go in there and stop this. We have yet to see examples coming forward. The police have said, yes, the person had to reload, so during that 1 or 2 seconds, we were able to go in there and take them out. It's coulda, woulda, shoulda defense. Doesn't normally work, okay? Now, police officers carry firearms. There is not a police officer in Rhode Island that's going to carry a 10-round magazine. They carry as many rounds as they can in their magazines. Why? Because in the event that their life or the life of somebody else is in danger, you don't want to limit the amount of ammunition you have on you. So why do you do that to a civilian whose life might be in danger? Somebody who's carrying a firearm for home defense. Does it make any difference? Is their life any less valuable than the police officers? Massachusetts and Connecticut have done this. They've limited the magazine capacity. Has anyone come forward and said, since they put that in place, look at the fantastic reduction in crime? In fact, it hasn't. It doesn't have an effect because it only affects the law-abiding citizen. Let me explain to you the real-world application. Magazine I carry right now, well, not on me because I'm in the State House, but it's 13 rounds. This bill passes, I can't carry that 13-round magazine anymore. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to carry 2 10s. So the real world application is you're going to make me carry more ammunition. It doesn't work. If you know somebody who has a firearm, they can change the magazine in a split second. This has no real world effect. All it does is infringe upon law-abiding citizens. If there were some statistics, if there were some studies, if there was something to say this works, the firearms community would probably be behind it. It doesn't work. We have other states that have done it. It doesn't work. Going to the assault weapons ban, which is Senate Bill 2493. Again, going back to what I stated before, from 1994 to 2004, we had the assault weapons ban in place. Didn't work, didn't reduce crime. Why? Because law-abiding citizens are the only people that are going to comply with this. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked in the past. Creating a registry in Rhode Island, it's illegal. We've had it for years where they said we shouldn't have a registry. This also would put a $25 fee on every person that had a firearm, $25 fee on every person that wanted to register each individual firearm. You're putting a burden on people for legally owning the firearms. They might not have used these firearms for years. You want them to register these? Think of what you just did to the value of that. You can't sell it to another private citizen. You can only sell it to a police officer, or only sell it out of state. The value of that firearm just went down. And I got to say this, I put this on the internet the other day, and I had a ton of responses from it. For years, people have looked at us in the firearms community and said, you know, you guys are conspiracy theorists. No one's coming for your firearms. They don't want to ban them. They don't want to take them away. How about now? Think we're all crazy now? This ban would effectively limit my ability to buy any more or restrict me to selling them. In effect, what you're doing is stopping law-abiding citizens from exercising their constitutionally protected right to buy additional firearms. And are we the people that are causing the problems? No. Does nothing for security at all. Okay? Let me give you another little fact that I don't think anybody has brought up yet. In 2012, Connecticut passed similar legislation. You guys all remember the news stories that went out? 80 to 90% of the law-abiding firearm owners in Connecticut refuse to comply with the law. Even at the cost of becoming felons, they will not register their firearms. They were interviewing the police officers and state police, and they were saying, we're not enforcing the law. You can take a look at it, Google it, the reports are still out there. Even the police were saying, we're not going to go take the firearms. Even if they don't register and they're felons, we don't care. They're not enforcing the law. You saw civil disobedience on a massive scale. Why? Because the law-abiding citizens are not your problem. Go after the criminals. Go after increasing security on schools, increasing other things. These don't work. In addition to that, if you create this type of assault weapons ban, what you do is you now have a clear definition. Anything other than a musket or a bolt-action rifle, other than a fully automatic, would be lumped into here. Almost every other firearm could be considered a semi-automatic based on simply cosmetic features. Forward assist, thumbhole stock, collapsible stock. It doesn't do anything. Once you create that big gap, that big class, very easy for them later on to go, not even grandfathered, you got to turn them in now. It would effectively take out probably 75% of the firearms that most people own, legally. Okay? So, I usually talk too much, so there's some other bills I'm going to let other people do it because you're probably sick of hearing and listening to me speak. But I'll take questions now, so.
Thank
Okay.
you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Sacco? Senator Nesselbush.
Just quickly, Frank, I'm interested in the registry. If we don't have a registry to know how many guns someone has, if we were to have a red flag law, policy, however we get there, so if somebody, horrifically says, I'm going to go kill school children and I'm not really feeling all that, with it these days, and we do seek through some yet to be lawful means to take those guns away. How would we know without a registry if they have 1 or 10? Like, how would we be able to actually effectively take the guns away from somebody who's dangerous?
Okay. Great question. So as a solicitor for the town of Johnston, I deal with the police department pretty regularly, and I usually get teased pretty often because every time I buy a new firearm, the officers go, "Hey, heard you bought a new Remington." They know. Every time that I buy a firearm, the transfer has to be approved, not only with the regular federal paperwork, it has to go through the town that you own, that you live in. So the police department in the town know every single firearm I own already. It has to be approved by the police department. I have clients that have come in the office that said they had cases expunged 10 years ago, and the police department still deny a transfer. So the police department already knows. To have a registry just creates a list, which they already have anyway. But the police departments know every single firearm I own that I bought, it goes through the police department. They know. So the registry, it really wouldn't be something that I would be willing to say that's okay, it's fine.
Thank you. Senator Jabor.
Frank, thanks for coming before the committee. You are very knowledgeable and always have a good insight. It's a very good balanced. I think we all know that the question of gun ownership has been out there forever in our country. And I read an article. It actually wasn't until, and I didn't know this until I read the article. It wasn't until 2008 that the Supreme Court actually established that there is a individual right to gun ownership in America.
Yes.
And Judge Scalia wrote the majority opinion, although our court was very divided on that issue. Tell me what your opinion is with regard to Judge Scalia had some very interesting remarks in that majority decision. I think it was called the Heller case. And I just want to read something to you and then tell me what you think. Judge Scalia said, "Nothing in our opinion should be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools, government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms." Now, I'm looking more at, obviously, the reaction here is with security of children in schools. Maybe the bigger issue now is those, rather than a felon showing up at a school or a public place, it appears to be someone who has mental illness issues. Tell me what in this legislation does not address what Judge Scalia is talking about, because the Supreme Court seems to be saying that it is giving the legislature some room to create some prohibition for specific situations. And it seems that the majority of the bills here are reactionary to what we've seen going on in America.
Okay. So what you're talking about is you want to say, would it be, if I'm trying to think of your question a little more narrowly, do you believe it'd be constitutional if there was a restriction on the ability to carry for a CCW holder on school grounds? Is that what you're talking about?
I would think more the question would probably be, is there anything in this bill that would violate someone's rights, considering either what their mental stage is or what their criminal record is? You, I think, have a perspective from a good standpoint that, there are a lot of lawful gun owners and they follow the law. And so your perspective seems to be here that somehow we're going to be taking those rights away from lawful gun owners and tipping the balance with regard to security for children in the schools. What in these bills that I'm saying would be so drastic that would truly infringe on that Heller decision? I don't think it's going to take away any rights, would it? Because I remember a couple of the sponsors saying one of the most important things that the public has to understand, and I think it was a member in the House, is that the priority of this body is not to be harmful to lawful and responsible gun owners. I think that should be known here.
Okay. So let me see if I can answer the question. It's kind of a multiple question on that. With regard to security in our schools and stuff, with regard to restricting a CCW holder's ability to go on school grounds. Currently, right now, the law, if you get a CCW holder, there is a section of the statute that says you can lawfully carry anywhere within the state. There's a specific exemption that says you can carry on school grounds. When you look at any infringement on the Second Amendment, the Supreme Court has already looked at that and said that anytime you infringe on that, that infringement has to be weighed against, you have to look at a legitimate state interest, weighed against the constitutional right. Those balancing texts has to be taken a look at under the strictest scrutiny, which meaning there can be no other reasonable restriction at all to accomplish the same state end for the security of the individuals. By sitting there and saying that an individual who's passed all the tests, his license to carry anywhere in the state, and just saying an absolute complete ban on not being able to go on school grounds, I think that fails strict scrutiny on that because there's no reasonable alternative to that. When I go to the courthouse, I have to lock up. If I go to another place, they may have well, you can't do it here even though they got lock boxes, but there are lock boxes available for people that carry concealed. So that would be a reasonable alternative to doing that. But simply banning it and saying you can't do it, I think it would fail a constitutional challenge just in that area because it fails strict scrutiny.
So looking at the language by Judge Scalia, what you're saying is that the bills need some sort of working up and having some language that would pass the scrutiny is what you're saying?
Yes. Anytime you infringe on a constitutional right, it has to be weighed against a standard of strict scrutiny. There can't be any other reasonable alternative or it fails.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Raptakis.
Frank, welcome to the Judiciary Committee. I got a quick question, a couple of questions for you. Recently, the state of Florida, the Senate, just passed a package of bills. I thought you were going to get to S2271, which is the bump stock prohibition. And I know that Florida has, the Senate Florida passed a bill 456, which is probably similar. Have you looked at what was just passed yesterday in the Florida State Senate versus this exact bill of 2271? The reason why I'm getting there is we're using Florida as a barometer and of what happened. And I don't want to go overboard here in Rhode Island what took place in Florida. I mean, we're going to try to pass some type of legislation that makes a lot of sense, not something that goes overboard. But if you compared what was passed in Florida the other day on bump stock prohibition versus what is here today, because you didn't get to that bill. Okay. I'm not sure if you looked at either or.
I did not look at Florida, but I can tell you what my opinion on the bump stocks is, and then I can tell you what the firearms community is. My opinion of the bump stocks is, in 1986, the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms said, we are the ones that are going to be regulating any fully automatic firearms, including the specific components which make a firearm semi-automatic, make it fully automatic. So they're not banned, but they are highly regulated. Only a few people with a special license can own those. What happens is, years ago, ATF came out with a letter and said the bump stock itself, the device, does not pigeonhole, does not fit into any one of their prohibited items. So therefore, it kind of snuck around what the ATF considers to be their area to prohibit these fully automatic firearms and the firearm components. It didn't go any further to say it's legal. It just says currently right now these bump stocks are not prohibited by us. And they said check with your local authority. You take a look at 1147, which we have right now, which is a prohibition against anybody owning a fully automatic firearm. What happens is, legally, right now, under our law, you can own the bump stock. You can have it. It's like you can own this. I can have this piece of paper right here. I can own it. It's not prohibited. I can't do anything with it. Once I attach it to a firearm, I violate 1147, that section which deals with machine guns. So just simply attaching it to a firearm makes it illegal, makes it a felony. So my own personal opinion, I think it kind of skirts around that the federal prohibition passed in 1986 on that. But we have a gap in our law, which we probably want to fix. The firearms community is kind of neutral on it because there are some people that want the bump stocks. Some people that don't want the bump stocks don't care about them. So we're kind of right in the middle of that. So we're kind of taking a neutral position because everybody's hasn't come to a consensus on
on
that.
this bill here in front of us that we heard today, you're taking a neutral position.
Neutral position because even the Attorney General came out and their position on the bump stocks is they're illegal. Same thing that I said, they are illegal, they're a felony. The problem with the bump stock bill right now as written, it has a definition of a high-speed device. That language in there is so unconstitutionally vague that it would fail. I don't know how anybody would prosecute it. I don't know how anybody would defend against it. What happens when you have a section of law that you put in here or you make a definition or you put it into a bill? If an individual, reasonable person cannot reasonably say what is prohibited or what I can and cannot do, it fails a constitutional challenge because it's vague. How would you know what components, what modifications violate the act or don't violate the act? I'll give you an example. If you're having a problem, if you have a 22 caliber rifle or a pistol, what happens? 22 sometimes are very finicky. You have to polish the ramp on the inside so they don't get caught and it'll feed and stops for the jams. All that does is make the firearm more consistent. It doesn't jam. You may have a police officer, attorney general, and says, you might modify the firearm so now the round slides into the chamber a split second faster. Did you modify it and make it a high-speed device now? You could ban it. So a person doesn't know what that does. I personally, because of the firearm I carry, my .228, the spring got weak in the magazine. That's because the magazine was manufactured in 1991. So I bought a replacement spring for that. The springs they have now, the replacement springs, are 2 pounds heavier. I can't get the factory spring. So am I going to be violating the law in a high-speed device because it pushes the round up faster into the chamber? How do I know? The section that you put in there with high-speed devices is absolutely unconstitutionally vague. How is somebody to know what could be a modification to make it a high-speed device or simply making it more reliable or more accurate? You can't have that. You can't have a section of law that does that.
And
that was the problem I
one
had
more
with
last
it.
question real quickly. On the issue, I'm not sure if we have a bill that's been introduced regarding the purchasing of someone under 21 of purchasing a firearm other than a handgun. I think federally you cannot purchase a handgun if you're under 21. And again, the package that in Florida that just passed prohibits a 21-year-old from purchasing a firearm other than a handgun. We know that you're going to be 21 years old to purchase alcohol. You're going to be 25 years old to rent a car. What's your opinion if we passed a bill that bars someone under 21 for purchasing other than a handgun?
My opinion would be this. Do you have any statistics at all to say that would actually make everyone safer? Has raising the limitation, the age, done anything in any other states to make people safer? Because if we're going to pass bills just to pass bills, why are we going from 18 to 21? If we can't say that what we're doing is helping, why are we doing it?
Do we have states that have completely prohibited anyone under 21 years old from purchasing any type of weapon? Do we have that? Any states have done that?
Not that I'm aware of.
So there's
I
no
don't have the
states.
statistics in front of me. I'm
So
sorry.
we can't use those statistics then, because there's no states
I would
other than
have to
under
see-
the federal law.
I would have to see. If it made people safer, I think a lot of people were behind it, but I'd want to see the data first, see if it actually works.
Thank
instead of
you,
just
Frank.
passing laws.
Thank you.